Throughout history, there have been moments where the world stood on the edge of total destruction. Moments where a single decision could have changed everything, where one wrong move might have led to a catastrophe beyond imagination. In October of 1962, the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. For 13 days, two superpowers stood on the brink of conflict, and millions of lives hung in the balance. This event would later become known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. But how did the world get so close to destruction? And more importantly, how did it survive? To understand the crisis, we need to look at the global tensions of the time. After World War II, the world was divided into two powerful blocs. On one side was the United States, on the other was the Soviet Union. Both nations possessed nuclear weapons, and both were locked in a political and ideological struggle known as the Cold War. The tension between these two superpowers grew stronger with each passing year. But everything changed in 1962. In October of that year, American intelligence made a shocking discovery. Spy planes flying over the island of Cuba captured images of something alarming. The Soviet Union was building nuclear missile sites just 90 miles off the coast of the United States. These missiles were capable of striking major American cities within minutes. For the United States, this was an immediate and serious threat. The president at the time, John F. Kennedy, was faced with an extremely difficult decision. If the missiles became operational, the balance of power could shift dramatically. But taking action against Cuba could trigger a full-scale war with the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev believed he was acting defensively. The United States had already placed nuclear missiles in Turkey, close to Soviet territory. From his perspective, placing missiles in Cuba was a way to restore balance. But from the American point of view, it was unacceptable. Tensions escalated rapidly. President Kennedy and his advisors considered several options. Some argued for immediate airstrikes to destroy the missile sites. Others suggested a full invasion of Cuba. But both options carried enormous risks. A direct attack could lead to nuclear retaliation from the Soviet Union. Instead, Kennedy chose a different approach. He ordered a naval blockade around Cuba. No ships carrying military equipment would be allowed to reach the island. This was a bold move. If Soviet ships attempted to break the blockade, it could lead to direct conflict between the two superpowers. For several days, the world watched as the situation unfolded. Soviet ships carrying supplies and equipment began approaching the blockade line. Tension reached a breaking point. If the ships continued forward, the United States Navy might be forced to take action. At that moment, the world stood on the edge of nuclear war. Then something unexpected happened. The Soviet ships slowed down, and eventually, they turned back. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the worst had been avoided. But the crisis was far from over. Behind the scenes, both sides were preparing for the possibility of war. Military forces were placed on high alert. Nuclear weapons were readied, and both governments continued to exchange tense messages. One of the most dangerous moments of the crisis happened beneath the ocean. A Soviet submarine, surrounded by American naval forces, believed that war might have already begun. The crew had lost communication with Moscow. Under extreme pressure, they considered launching a nuclear torpedo. If they had done so, it could have triggered a full-scale nuclear war. But one officer on board refused to authorize the launch. His decision may have prevented a global catastrophe. As the days passed, both sides realized the seriousness of the situation. A peaceful resolution became increasingly urgent. Eventually, secret negotiations began between the United States and the Soviet Union. The solution required compromise. The Soviet Union agreed to remove its missiles from Cuba. In return, the United States secretly agreed to remove its missiles from Turkey. On October 28, 1962, the crisis officially came to an end. The world had avoided nuclear war. But the events of those 13 days left a lasting impact. The Cuban Missile Crisis showed just how close humanity had come to total destruction. It revealed how quickly political tensions could escalate into a global threat, and it highlighted the importance of communication and restraint between world leaders. In the years that followed, both superpowers took steps to reduce the risk of nuclear conflict. Direct communication lines were established. New agreements were made to control nuclear weapons. Because the world had learned a terrifying lesson. Sometimes history is defined not by what happens, but by what almost happened. And in October of 1962, the world came closer than ever before to ending itself, all within just 13 days.